Welcome to Stories I Didn't Tell Last Sunday. Hi, I'm Doug McAllister for Journey Fellowship Church, and today joining me is Pastor Al Chartier. He's our next step pastor here at Journey, and today we're going to be talking about apologetics. Al, that's one of your favorite subjects.
Apologizing, today.
Yeah. We're not going to apologize to you today, even though we probably owe you all an apology.
I don't know that it's my favorite of all things, but definitely it's part of the it's part of the whole thing that encompasses evangelism and discipleship and learning how to talk to people about their faith and stuff like that. So
apologetics is a branch of theology that defends the gospel message.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think originally the word in the Greek has to do with being able to give a formal defense for why you believe what you believe, basically. So it doesn't have anything to do with apologizing necessarily,
but it's defending.
Correct.
Yeah. I think we all learned so much about public speaking from the Greeks, especially their, all their rhetorical, training devices, including apologetics. So it became part of the Christian faith. In fact, Peter kind of defined it in 2 Peter, is it?
1 Peter 3:15, I think.
3:15. Yeah, and he said, be ready to give an answer
to
anyone who asks you. And I think that's probably the core verse of apologetics. And it's one that we're using in the I Believe series that we're doing on the Journey app, that we know what we believe and we can defend it. So let's staying true to the name of our podcast, open with the story. I have a whole list of apologists that I like to listen to. I have 7 that I listen to regularly. There's probably 50 or more active apologists now in the Christian movement. And you and I both have some similar favorites on the list. But one of my favorites is Josh Mcdowell. Yeah, so I have a Josh Mcdowell story. You had a connection with Josh somehow.
Josh wrote the book More Than a Carpenter, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So back when I was in Bible college at SUM, that was one of the first books that I was required to read, More Than a Carpenter. Wow. And that's really what kind of got me hooked on this idea of apologetics, because I got into Bible college literally 8 months after being saved.
Wow.
So it's like I was shooting up heroin, and then 8 months later I'm in Bible college.
You didn't waste any time there. You went from darkness to light.
Yeah.
Instantly.
So I didn't know anything really about how to defend the faith. I barely knew what my own faith was. All I knew was my life was changed by Jesus, and I was called into the ministry. So, but reading that book, More Than a Carpenter by Josh Mcdowell, helped me to see that there were formal reasons why we could believe what we believe.
Yeah.
And I think his main argument in that book was Jesus was either Lord or lunatic or a liar.
Right.
And then you were able to present Christ to individuals and help them see that he was not a liar, nor was he a lunatic.
Josh had a way of taking a huge subject and bringing it down to one thought.
Right.
And how many people have quoted that? Lord, lunatic, or liar?
It's huge, yeah.
Everybody quotes that.
Right.
It's just kind of embedded itself into preaching vocabulary.
I don't know if he came up with that. It might have actually been C.S. Lewis.
Could have been. He may have been quoting.
Yeah, I think
master.
It is, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, so here's my Josh Mcdowell story. My friend and I were traveling, and we stopped at a coffee shop in a town that I wasn't familiar with, and we picked it at random. Mm-hmm. So it's a busy city. It's a big town. It's a large metropolitan city, and we pull into this coffee shop. We go in and we sit down, and he and I are talking because we're on our way to a pastor's conference or something. We just enjoying the road trip, and then out of the corner of my eye across the room, I spotted whom I thought was Josh Mcdowell.
Yeah.
And so I told my friend, I said, hey, is that Josh Mcdowell? I said, don't look back. So immediately he looks back.
Of course. Happened to me yesterday in church.
Oh, really?
Jen said, is that such and such? Don't look. Just kind of, I was like, how can I not look? I'm gonna...
Yeah, why don't you, don't look now. How long should I wait before?
Oh, it's happening. I'm looking.
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, it's like, you don't. So anyway, I said, don't look up right now, but I think that's Josh Mcdowell. He and I both were big fans of Josh Mcdowell. He turned around casually and looked at him, and she said, yeah, that's definitely Josh Mcdowell. So, of course, like any, sane pastor would do, I went up to him. I did it under the premise that I was walking to the bathroom because he was sitting near the bathroom hallway entrance. So I walked by his table and slowed down, and I said the classic line, "Hey, aren't you Josh Mcdowell?" Terrible way to ask somebody, "Are you Josh Mcdowell?" He looked up from his coffee, and I'm sure he was probably totally tired of being interrupted and drinking his coffee because, he's an international author, preacher, everybody in our circle knows Josh Mcdowell. But he was so graceful, so kind. He put his coffee down and closed the book he was reading. He said, "Yes, I am. Who are you?" And I told him my name. He said, "Sit down." I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm having coffee with Josh Mcdowell." So we stayed there like 15 minutes, and I don't know if I overstayed my welcome or if he was really that graceful.
Right.
But he made me feel like he wanted me to stay. So I did, and we talked. We talked about his books. We talked about his life. And then when I got up to leave, he said, "Doug, what if I give you my cell number?" And I was like, "That would be amazing. I can have your personal cell number." He said, "Sure." He said, "Just don't share it."
Right.
So I'm going to post it on the screen in a minute.
100%.
You get your pen and paper ready. So Josh gave me his cell number, and I still have it to this day. Never used it.
Yeah.
I never had a reason to use it.
That's why you're his best friend.
"Hey, Josh, I was just calling you. Remember I was that stranger that walked up to you in the coffee shop in a faraway..." "Yeah, Doug, we were watching you closely." So
that's how I pick all my best friends. We never talk. Guy's great.
Yeah, he and I never
needs anything from me.
He's the best kind of friend. We never talk at all. He's low maintenance. So anyway, I got to spend about 15 minutes with Josh Mcdowell.
Right.
Which was quite an honor. Even though he, I'm sure he gets bothered all the time like that. I'm just amazed at his grace. So that's a story I didn't get to tell last Sunday, but you have.
Yep.
A Mcdowell story.
Yeah. So when I graduated Bible college in 2012, 2013, right in that area, I knew that I was supposed to continue on in my education, and just being a fan of apologetics, like I was, loving evangelism, that whole aspect of things. I felt like I needed to go right into school, and there was this part of me that felt like I had this internal struggle that if I didn't continue on in my education, that I would never do it. And I remember I talked to one of the professors, Dr. Savage, and he said, I was telling him, "Hey, I've read some studies that if I don't go to school right afterwards because of my age, that I'll probably never go back." And he just kind of confirmed something that I knew, but there are things but sometimes somebody says something and it awakens it in you and brings it to life a little bit more.
Yeah.
And anyway, Dr. Savage said, "Oh, you're an anomaly. Like, do you look at the way you got saved?"
I've always said that.
Yeah, you have. You really did. You said I was a transformer one time.
Yeah, I did. You still mean it.
Depending upon where I'm at, what situation I'm in. Absolutely. Yeah, you can kind of get in where you fit in, depending upon the crowd.
I remember that story you told me about Dr. Savage telling you that you were an anomaly, which inspired you to enroll in.
So with
Biola.
that, I said, okay, well, I'll go to school at Biola. I was really interested in apologetics and defending the faith.
Biola is Bible Institute of LA, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I enrolled in Biola, and I think I took 2 semesters there. One of the semesters was an apologetics class, and the professor was Sean Mcdowell, Josh McDowell's son.
Yeah, son
and
of Josh.
I just thought that was so amazing. Like, gosh, his dad's famous author. His dad had coffee with Pastor Doug.
Yeah, I'm sure they talked about it at Christmas.
100%, absolutely.
That conversation over. Remember that time we met?
Yeah, we never really had any connection other than, "Al, where's your assignment? How come it's late?" And you never,
how you fell in this class.
You're such a bad student. You are an anomaly. Everybody else is passing.
You are an anomaly. I'm sure that's not true.
I did well.
Yeah.
But the main point was just that I thought it was really cool. One, to see, to know the success that his dad had as a Christian author and apologist, and to see that kind of passed down to the next generation.
Yeah.
His son Sean was he's my age, maybe a little bit older, but solid Christian, solid Bible teacher, well-rounded theologian, and just kind of seeing that passed down from generation to generation is really inspiring.
Yeah. So all of these apologists that we're going to talk about today, they all have their own website, or at least a connection where you can get their information. Josh's website may be my favorite of all time, josh.org.
Nice.
How easy is that to remember? josh.org.
Yeah.
So if you want to find out more about Josh McDowell or read some of his stuff, all of those resources are at josh.org.
Yep.
So I appreciate the McDowell connection.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Josh.
Yeah, you had coffee. I shared an
email. You're friends with Sean. So, man, we're just connected, bro. We know people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing apologist. And, boy, those men have more influence in our lives than they probably realize.
Right.
Wasn't it Josh that wrote Evidence That Demands a Verdict?
Yep.
And that book, when I was a young believer, really just rocked me, man, because he presented all the evidence that of the resurrection and all the other things, that goes along. And it just really, stiffened my backbone in faith. I was like, oh, there really is.
So Gary Habermas, who also was teaching at Biola, I think he still teaches occasionally there. But I was introduced to him through a class with Sean Mcdowell, who is really the world's foremost scholar when it comes to the resurrection. Yeah. And there's so much evidence out there, and that's one of the things about apologetics. There's so much evidence out there for all of the things that we, I say we mean in most individuals within the church. Yeah. Things that we typically kind of get hung up on, and we may struggle to find the right words to we know we believe something, but sometimes we struggle explaining to others other than saying, I just know. And there's nothing wrong with quote unquote just knowing.
It's an experiential faith. It's real.
100%.
But then it needs to be explained.
Well, like Peter said in 1 Peter 3:15, that's the verse that everything kind of comes back to. Always be ready to give a reason for the hope that lies within you, and to do so with gentleness and respect. Right. And that is like the foundational scripture for apologetics and for Christianity, frankly.
It's the cornerstone.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go over a list of my favorite apologists, but let me start with this one. One of my favorite non-pastor apologists, and probably the most effective apologist in the world today, may not even be a Christian. And you know what I'm talking about.
What's his name?
Jordan Peterson.
Peterson, yeah.
Yeah, so I was watching Joe Rogan interview Jordan Peterson the other day.
Right.
And, of course, Joe Rogan has 40 million listeners or whatever. So not everything that Joe Rogan says is to be believed or good, but he says a lot of stuff, and he brings on people that he may disagree with, and he let Jordan talk freely for, I don't know,
way too long.
Some of his podcasts last for
4
days.
hours, yeah.
Yeah, they last like, I got to take a nap.
Yeah.
I'll come back to this tomorrow.
Definitely.
Yeah, so Jordan Peterson was on there, and of course I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fan, and he went into the defense of the cross. Mm-hmm. And man, it may be one of the best defenses of the cross that I have ever heard, much less from a person who says he's not a believer.
Right.
So maybe God's dealing with Jordan Peterson.
Definitely.
I do know because I watched his daughter's podcast. I can't remember her name.
Michaela.
Yeah, Michaela made her faith public in October of last year, which was astounding news. She had a born again experience and gave her life to Jesus and made it public on her podcast, which takes a lot of courage for someone of that status in the world. It could cost you a lot, to stand strong in your faith. So maybe God's working in the whole Peterson family, but I do know that most of the principles that Jordan teaches are biblically based, or at least biblically influenced, So he may be my favorite apologist right now, who's may or may not be saved. Only God
I don't
knows.
think he's saved. I've listened to him a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I don't think he's genuinely saved, but he's one of those guys that's right there on the cusp. And I think it's primarily because he's been teaching lessons from the Bible for years.
Yeah.
And going through different books of the Bible. He teaches it more from a philosophical type of standpoint as opposed to a literal standpoint. Yeah. But I love him as well, just like so many other people do. I think he's one of those guys that is, he's right there. And the more he interacts with God's word, the more he tries to figure it out from I don't want to say a worldly perspective, but maybe a worldly perspective. Yeah. I think the more it just kind of pierces his heart. Yeah. And that's why I'm with you. Like, I think he's right there on the cusp of salvation.
There's a short clip on YouTube. It may be 10 or 15 minutes long. It's him talking to another guy that I didn't know, but it's mostly Jordan talking about his journey toward Jesus. Mm-hmm. And he said, and his voice was broken. Right, he had a lump in his throat, and he had tears in his eyes. Yep. And he said, I think I believe, but I don't know why I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think I believe, but he said, I'm still hung up on the resurrection.
Right.
Which is the very cornerstone of Christianity, you know.
Yep.
So he's right. That's the big hump to get over,
Yep.
that Jesus not only lived and died. He said, look, we know historically that Jesus existed. Like all the other gods in the past that may or may not have existed, there's no historical record of them. But we know for a fact that Jesus Christ was a literal person.
Right.
And so we know he lived, and we know he died.
Right.
Because his method of execution was well known. It was practiced by the Romans for 400 years. He said, so the details there are very historically accurate. He said, but what I can't get past is, did he come back from the dead? Mm. And man, that's when you narrow down Christianity to the core.
Right.
He lived, he died, he rose again.
Well, I think in 1 Corinthians 15, if I'm not mistaken, that's what Paul said. Everything is hinged upon that, because without the resurrection, your faith is futile.
Right.
Your faith is useless if you don't believe in the resurrection. So that is literally what it all boils
Because
down
if
to.
in this world is our only hope, we are hopeless people.
Right.
But if there's a hope of a new world where we'll defeat death, hell, and the grave, or we'll follow Jesus as he defeated death, hell, and the grave, then there's hope for all of us. So, yeah, I'm hanging my hat on that hook. Mm-hmm. I'm trusting the resurrection. Amen. I believe that Jesus lived and died. I believe he rose again. So I pray that Jordan has an experience with Jesus. But I do love how he is a defender of the faith. All right, so we talked about Josh. Let me go down a list, and let's talk about a couple of them. My favorite, number one on my list, is C.S. Lewis, and that may be everybody's number one.
Right.
C.S. Lewis was a brilliant man. He was. I think he was Irish. Wasn't he born in Ireland? I believe
Scotland or something.
Yeah,
like
I think
that,
he was born in Ireland, but he taught at Oxford, and he was. Remember, he was part of the writing group,
the Inklings. I think.
Yeah, the Inklings. That's what it was. So it was him and J.R.R. Tolkien, and boy, he has a lot of initials for a name. J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and there was 4 or 5 other writers.
I think that was the litmus test to get in. You have to use initials.
You have to have 2 or more initials.
The more
to get
initials in your
C.S.
name,
Lewis, J.R.R.
the higher the ranking
Tolkien.
in the club you had.
Yeah, there was even a woman in the
Really?
Inklings group. Yeah, I can't remember her name, but she also became a pretty famous author in her day. So there's
Did she
like 5 or 6
cigars and down.
Well, yeah, and I
heavy
find
beers?
that intriguing. Sometimes our idea of what Christianity is a little skewed by our culture. They would meet at the bar. What was the tavern was called?
I don't remember the name of it.
Oh man, I don't know. It's one of those English taverns with a really cool name, like the Donkey and the Burro or something like that.
Right.
People watching probably screaming it because they know the name of it. But they would meet at this little tavern right near the college, and they would talk over their ideas. And from what I read, that's where J.R.R. Tolkien influenced C.S. Lewis about his faith in Christ.
Right.
So he led his friend to the Lord, basically, to use, Western or at least American terminology. So anyway, C.S. Lewis not only became a believer, he became probably the most well-known apologist in the 20th century. And his books are legendary.
Right.
We've all read them. We were all schooled on them. Mere Christianity. It's the textbook,
right?
To understand the basics of Christianity. But he also wrote some really good stuff that, outside of that. He wrote, what was the one about the demon, Wormwood?
Screwtape Letters.
Yeah, Screwtape Letters to his nephew. Oh, it's such a great book, man. Well, what a great way to teach, theology of the dark side without being preachy. You know? He just showed the devil in action.
Definitely a weird way, a different perspective on things, kind of flipping everything around.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I read it, I couldn't. I was like trying to wrap my head around. I was like, "What is he doing? What's going on?" Yeah. Like it was. I think I was saved for maybe 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
Maybe a year within that first year when I had that class. And it's literally a whole new way of thinking about things.
I think I bought that book on a whim at the bookstore at Bible college. I was just looking for something light to read, and I just grabbed it off the shelf. It looked small. It was a thin book, and of course C.S. Lewis's name was on. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna read this." And man, I think I read it in one sitting. I couldn't put it down.
Right.
This is so interesting. He also wrote "Surprised by Joy" and "Grief Observed," which are and he had one about pain, the problem with pain.
Yep.
Man, that book really settled into my soul when I first read it. In fact, I wrote a book about pain many, many years later, didn't do justice to what C.S. Lewis did, but it was so ingrained in my soul that it really helped me to process human suffering.
Right.
Because that is a huge question.
Right.
If God is so good, why do humans suffer?
That's probably the number one question that people have when you're, having those discussions about faith and whatnot.
And that becomes an apologetic discussion.
Right.
So whether believers know it or not, they're already engaged in apologetics because people ask those questions. If God is so loving, why does he send people to hell?
Right.
If God is so good, why does he allow children to suffer?
Right.
Those are all legitimate questions.
Yeah,
and we do ourselves a disservice to dismiss them.
Right.
We have to give a real answer. So when I read The Problem with Pain, it really just informed me of why I could feel good in defending the goodness of God in face of human suffering. Some of those books, though, were inspired by his relationship with his wife that he married late in life. He was married to Joy, I believe, Joy Davidman, and she had 2 sons when C.S. Lewis met her. And you know how they met? Mm-mm. So I'm going from memory here, so you could check my memory. But I read the story of his life. And of course, there's a movie called Shadowlands. If you want to watch Shadowlands, it's the story of C.S. Lewis and him meeting Joy and Mary and late in life and his only true love. And she tragically died just a few years later. So for a brief time, he had the love of his life, and that's why he wrote A Grief Observed. He was processing his own grief. So after he became a believer, he was still writing fiction novels. He was on Time magazine cover, I think in the 30s or whatever, as the most well-known fantasy author in the world. Not as a believer, which he would become soon, but as an author. So he was an international celebrity back, after World War I. So when he got saved, it opened up doors for him to share his faith. He became an international speaker for Christianity. So he got cards and letters from all over the world, and one of them came from Joy. And she wrote him a letter, and he was interested, and he wrote her back, and it turned into a relationship. Right. And eventually they got married. And in fact, his son, or his stepson, Douglas, has, went on to carry, his message even after his death, and may still be involved, if he's still alive, in C.S. Lewis's estate, but it's just a beautiful story of how God redeemed all the areas of his life. Right. But we shouldn't forget, he's the guy that's behind the Narnia series, which is, still sweeping the world today.
I think last night in the Super Bowl there, so I guess Amazon has a new rendition or something.
They bought the rights to Narnia, from what I heard. Yeah. Yeah, and they're going to remake the whole thing. Is that what they're doing?
I guess. I don't know. It was news to me. Literally, it was a commercial during the Super Bowl last night.
What did they say?
They just showed before
I was
the
busy
ring.
with nachos probably at that time. Yeah,
yeah, it was just one of those things. It was like, wait a minute, what like literally it was complete new to me.
Yeah. So when I heard this, a total reboot, but they have strict instructions from the C.S. Lewis estate that they have to stay true to the message. Right. It is a gospel presentation. Narnia, the hero is the lion. Right. And who is, I don't want to spoil it, but if you haven't read it already, you're way behind. Right. So here's a spoiler alert.
I mean, it's only 70 years old.
Yeah, so you had a chance already. So, it's the death of the lion and his resurrection, which is just a story of Narnia, But it's an intriguing movie. And even the trilogy that came out a decade ago, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the whole story, again, of the kids going through into the magical land of Narnia, But that was all from his, inspired by his faith and his walk with the Lord and the retelling of.
Again, it's just a very creative way of telling the biblical story. Yeah. In a super creative way. Yeah,
and his friend J.R.R. Tolkien, he wrote the Lord of the Rings, which is a great epic in the fantasy genre, but it is splashed throughout with Christian themes. It's just a beautiful picture of good versus evil, and David and Goliath, and plus all the battle scenes, man.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they're classics. I think one of the most interesting things about both of those series, one, the way that they kind of interweave the the Christian narrative, the story of Christ and faith into their stories in a very creative way. But to me, I look at that and that's why one of my favorite apologists is one of my favorite apologists because of the way he tells stories, and I really feel like if you can tell a story in a compelling way and capture someone's attention for a few moments, rather than, as far as apologetics is concerned, rather than trying to like beat them over the head with like, this is why we believe the resurrection and this is why you're wrong, and if you don't believe this, then blah blah blah. So for me, I like the ability to tell a story.
And so who's your favorite?
Greg Koukl right now is, and for the last few years, he's been one of my favorite apologists.
I have never heard
So
of Greg.
Yeah, so he's not the guy, he's not the Ravi Zacharias, he's not the C.S. Lewis, he's not the guy who's going to be on the cover of Time magazine, and he isn't writing textbooks necessarily, but he is one of the professors at Biola. And again, that's how I got introduced to him. From Biola in 2013 or 14, whenever
Through
it was.
Your friendship with Sean.
Clearly.
Hold that book up where the camera can see it.
So this book here, Tactics by Greg Koukl, this is one of the books that he has written. And the reason that I like the book so much, the subtitle is A Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions.
Wow.
So one of the reasons that I like the book so much is, as you mentioned before, like a lot of people have a problem with pain, obviously. Pain because of the evil in the world, they struggle to come to an authentic relationship with God. And that's vital. It's real. It's we can't discount that. But there are other reasons people don't come to faith as well. And what he does in the book is he kind of gives you a game plan on how to have those conversations in a storytelling type of way, if that makes sense. So rather than just giving you a list of bullet points, why this is right and why that's wrong, he helps you weave those bullet points into stories. So, for me, the top 3 reasons that people usually have with, so if I'm doing evangelism, if I'm out on the streets, again, that's part of the SUM experience for the first 7 or 8 years that I was saved. We're on the streets during Mardi Gras. We're doing evangelism.
You guys were like on Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras,
right,
in the thick of 1 million people. I was down a couple times with you.
So there's literally hundreds and hundreds of conversations that I've had over the years, and those are apologetic conversations.
Right.
So the number one reason that most people struggle is because of pain. And frankly, in the midst of Bourbon Street or any type of evangelistic outreach like that, it's really hard because they might say like, okay, well, if there's with all this evil in the world, how can there be a good God if there's all this evil in the world? Or how can God be powerful? So they may articulate it like that, but 9 times out of 10, that reason is it's tied to a personal pain. It's tied to something deep in their own life that has hurt them, and you're not gonna overcome that with a mere argument. Well, it's because God has given humanity free will. It's not like they're all of a sudden going to be like, oh, is that all it because of free will, now all of a sudden my personal painful experience doesn't matter. No, it absolutely matters.
Right.
So, those main arguments of, from the one hand, it's people dealing with pain. Then on the other hand, I run into individuals who, they think they have something that they don't have. So they think they're good because they've done some good deeds. They think because they have helped, little old ladies across the street and, gotten rescued kittens out of trees and, put some money in a plate once a year for Christmas. They think they have something that they don't have. So that's the second individual that I usually run into. And then the third type of individual I run into is that person who... they think there are multiple ways to get to heaven.
Many roads that lead to heaven.
So what Greg does in this book and why I like it so much is he kind of gives you a story, if you will, to tackle those types of problems. So like when
I got to get that book.
The individuals on the street who think they have something, typically what I would do is I let them know right off the bat, like, listen, you're never going to see me again. So you don't have to really convince me of anything. I'm out here talking to people about their faith because I want to make sure that if something horrific happens, you know where you're going to spend eternity.
Right.
So, and they'll say like, yeah, I think I know where I'm going to be because I've done X, Y, Z. And very quickly, I'll simply say like, okay, let's run through a brief exercise. Who's the president? And so who's the president?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Oh, yeah, Joe Biden.
There you go.
Yeah.
Joe Biden. Yeah. So you know the president's name. And I'll just kind of take them through this exercise. What's the president's wife's name? Oh, his wife's name is Jill.
Yeah.
Oh, so you know the president's name. You know the president's wife's name. Oh, did you see the other day? Didn't something just happen with him the other day? Yeah, they got a cat. Amazing. With all the things going on in the world, they're going to put the fact that the president got a kitten on with nothing else to talk about in the world, apparently.
Yeah.
So I'll take people through this process and help them see that they know all these facts about the president. But then I ask them the question, hey, if you wanted to get into the White House, do you think you would be able to get into the White House today?
Yeah.
What happened if you went to, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? And they quickly realize, no, I would not be able to get into the White House today. Well, do you know why you can't get into the White House today? No matter how many facts you know about the president, you can't get in. But do you know how you would get in?
If you knew him.
If he knew you.
Yeah. Ooh, good.
If he knew who you were and your name was on that list, then they would open the gate and you would be able to get in. And it's literally what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7. Depart from me, you sinner, for I never knew you. They come to him and they say, I've done all these works in your name.
For you. Yeah.
Right. I've did all these things, but Jesus said, depart from me, you sinner, for I never knew you. So I help them see right away, this isn't about what you know or what you've done. It's about, does Jesus know you? And that's a really, really powerful
that's a really
thing.
Good word.
So then on the other side of the coin, those individuals who think that there are many different paths to get to heaven, a couple different things. And again, this all comes from Greg's book. I'm no genius, but that's why I love the book so much. He gives you stories to tell. So one of the illustrations that he provides is if an individual thinks that, there are many paths, imagine the mountain. And there are many paths to kind of get up the mountain is what they would say to get to where God is. First of all, the individuals who taught those other faiths, the founders of those faiths, didn't believe that themselves.
Right.
Buddha didn't believe there are multiple ways to get there. Krishna or whoever, they did not believe Muhammad. They did not believe that there were multiple paths. Right. They all thought that their path was the only path.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is he gives this story of a few hundred years ago in England or Scotland, somewhere like that. Outside of this Queen's Castle, there were, a couple of acres, a massive hedge that was a maze. And he gets you to imagine a huge maze. And now at the beginning of this maze, you've got a few different individuals, and he kind of takes the major Abrahamic faith, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He would say those three are fairly similar, and they're starting off, and then you have all of the Eastern religions, such as Hinduism, thank you, and Krishna. Buddhism and Krishna, all that type of stuff. Yeah. He would say right from the beginning, the three Abrahamic religions all start moving down the same path together, and those others all quickly spread and go in a different direction. They are not similar to these three in any way, shape, or form. But after these three start moving forward, one branches off one way, a few minutes later, another branches off a different way, and now all of them are on different paths.
Right.
And what he explains in the book is, okay, well, as you're wandering and getting through this path, and just like hundreds of years ago, people would travel all the way to wherever this hedge was to go see if they could find their way through. Eventually, they get halfway through this thing and they realize they're stuck. And the hedges are 10, 12 foot tall. You can't see out of it, but there was an individual whose job was to be the spotter. So he's up high. He's on a platform. He could see from a different vantage point than the individuals who are stuck in the hedge. And eventually, when you realize you're stuck, what do? You call out.
Ask for help.
Hey, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do. And the spotter yells down, hey, take a left. Hey, take a right. Go here, go here. And he leads the individual to get out of that maze.
Right.
And what Greg teaches in the book is eventually, remember who he's talking to, somebody who believes that there are multiple paths to get to heaven. He says, eventually you're going to come to a place where you're stuck. And the best thing that you can do is to call out. Who are you going to call out to? Call out to Muhammad and see if he answers you.
Yeah.
See if Muhammad leads you to the left or to the right or which way.
Yeah.
What what he teaches again is if you come to that place where you need help, call out, and we guarantee Jesus will lead you and get you out of there. So the book is full of those types of illustrations. I love it. I think it's amazing. And again, it's very useful when you're having apologetic type conversations. That's why I like him more than so many others that are out there right now.
Yeah. I'm going to start following him. Does he have any good videos, or is it all written books?
I'm sure he does. I haven't looked anything up recently, so I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to look him up. So I appreciate the connection. All right, let me run down this list, see if any of these guys are on your list. J. Warner Wallace, love him.
Yep.
Ravi Zachariah.
Definitely.
Which we probably have to talk about Ravi in a minute because, we all know what happened. Lee Strobel.
Yep.
Huge.
The Case for Christ.
Case for Christ.
Case for a Creator.
Case for Easter. Case, he made a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of them are so informative.
Right.
Of course, we mentioned Josh Mcdowell.
Yep.
Dr. Michael Brown.
Yep, one of my favorites.
Which is a legend. He came, was it at Brownsville School? Brownsville Revival?
The Brownsville Revival in Pensacola.
Yeah, and now, where is he now?
The Fire School of Ministry.
There it is,
which is in North Carolina, I think.
Right.
But, he's got a lot of different things going on.
I'm reading him more and more, too, in the mainstream press. People are quoting him a lot.
Yep.
And they don't always honor him, but sometimes it's to disparage him. But he's making an influence big time in culture, because his arguments are so well reasoned.
Right.
You can't really dismiss them. I
got to meet him just a couple of months back.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Where?
So when I was on sabbatical, I went to a conference that he had at a church in Lafayette. So there's a professor, one of the Regent professors.
I am jealous, man.
Yeah. So the professor from Regent is one of the pastors at Our Savior's Church out there.
Right.
So I went to his campus and I had sent him a message and I wanted to get a copy of the pastor's book.
Right.
So he was like, "Yeah, I'll mail you a few copies for free." I was like, "Oh, that's great." And then I didn't hear anything back from him.
Yeah.
So then when I showed up at the conference, I went up to him and I was like, "Hey, man, you're supposed to mail me some books." He was like, "Oh, I forgot all about it. Come to my office."
Oh, wow.
And I'll give you. I have some in my office, so I go in the back to his office, and I'm talking with the pastor for a few minutes, and he's giving me some books.
Yeah.
And Dr. Brown comes walking in, and I was like, like you meeting Josh McDowell,
like a fangirl. Yeah. You getting nervous?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Stuttering.
Yeah. It was so awesome. So I got to talk with him for a few minutes, and we took a picture together and all that. But he's definitely one of my heroes of the faith.
Yeah, that is so good, man.
Yeah.
And he's Pentecostal.
Yep.
Which is, an extra added bonus.
His story, I started listening to him again. I was saved for maybe a year. He had still has a radio show, podcast, inthelineoffire.org, I think.
Yeah.
And but he's got a similar story. Overcame drugs and alcohol, everything as 16, 17-year-old kid, and got radically saved, filled with the Holy Spirit, and now has been on fire for Jesus for 50 years.
AskDrBrown.org is very informative. Good stuff there, man.
Yep.
Man, you got to meet not only a McDowell, but you met Dr. Brown.
Yeah.
Man, that's so cool.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Dr. Michael Brown, Tim Keller, who recently retired from the Presbyterian Church in New York. What was it called? Resurrection?
Redeemer or something?
Redeemer, yeah, Redeemer. William Lane Craig, who is an older guy, but still, he's an academic, so he goes into deep waters, and if you can't swim, you got to get a life preserver. But he's
one of the best.
He's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. This guy is not an apologist, and he's already dead, but his songs, man, spoke to me. Rich Mullins, Our God is an Awesome God, Creed, the Apostles' Creed song he wrote. Sometimes, even though he wasn't intending to be apologetic in his nature, but songs should defend the gospel.
Definitely.
And the song should retell the story. And Rich did probably a goodest job as anybody.
Right.
So all these guys are some of my favorites. These are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So out of the list of 8, anybody else stand out?
Look, did you mention J. Warner Wallace?
I did.
Yeah.
He's number 2 on my list.
Yeah.
I love him because he's like everyday guy.
Yep.
You know, he was a homicide detective in California.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I like him. He's easy to understand.
Yeah.
You know, Lee Strobel, easy to understand.
Absolutely.
As much as I love William Lane Craig and Ravi Zacharias, you know, those are guys, like, I got to have my thinking cap on when I'm reading those guys. Like, can't have any distractions. I have to be focused on what they're saying. Right. Oftentimes I have to stop the video and rewatch a part of it again, or read one page and then stop and then read the page over again to make sure I fully grasp what they're saying.
Are deep. J. Warner Wallace is easy to understand.
Right.
You know, he has a lot of videos. You know, we have our Right Now Media that Journey gives a subscription to everybody active here. And J. Warner Wallace has a load of videos.
Yeah, he does.
Man, it's so good.
Yeah, you feel like you're watching, what was that show, Unsolved Mysteries?
Yeah.
Back in the day, the guy would come out.
Unraveling the mystery, yeah.
He's a great storyteller.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
J. Warner Wallace is one of my favorites, you know, that is currently active. Ravi Zachariah, as we all know, Ravi passed away about a year or so ago.
Right.
At the end of his life, unfortunately, was marred with a scandal. I don't think that discounts his body of work. It doesn't make what he said any less true. Of course, it does call into question his character. And it's heartbreaking,
right?
You know, for me, and because I don't know what's true and what's not, and I don't really want to wade into the gossip. You know, what happened is between them and God, and what his family does about it, and the people that were affected by it.
Right.
All that's real, but I have no control over any of it, and I can't affect the outcome of it.
Right.
But what I can do is judge the body of his work, man, and I've learned so much from him.
Same.
You know, and I don't apologize for that. You know,
right.
He was a human being. I'm sure he made mistakes. But I don't in any way, you know, think that disqualifies his body of work, you know, because he was a staunch defender of the faith,
right?
You know, who rose from poverty to become an international, you know, apologist. And,
right.
We give credit where credit's due. Any thoughts on Ravi?
Well, you know, like you said, he's one of those guys that at least I've listened to and watched and followed for so long that it's like, man, he's got so much good material. And then when he does have when some news comes out about his character flaws and defects and, you know, possible moral failures and things of that nature, it is really, really heartbreaking. But, you know, again, I kind of look back to my own life and, you know, within that first year of being saved, you know, we had an individual who I really looked up to, who made some really poor choices. And that individual was very instrumental, you know, praying over me when I was, you know, going through withdrawals and, you know, helping me get into rehab and all those sorts of things. But I learned the very important lesson early on, and that was, you know, I'm going to follow you as you follow Christ.
Right.
And the moment you stop following Christ is the moment that I begin to separate the work that you did from who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to allow your character, because your character speaks for who you are, and your character's taking you over here. The work that you did in my life, that individual, you know, that's valid. It was very crucial to help me be who I am right now. Yeah. All the work that Zacharias has done, all of the works that he's written and the videos he's produced and all that type of stuff, it's valuable. It's a gift to the body of Christ.
I agree.
But we have to learn to separate, you know, the man from the work.
Yeah, and I think a lot of believers allow a spiritual leader in their life who had a moral failure. They allow that to shipwreck their faith, which is a gross misjudgment of the believer. You know, because like you said, I'm going to follow you as you follow Christ.
Right.
But if you no longer follow Christ, or if you veer away from it, I'm going to stay true to Jesus.
Right.
You know, the man that led me to Christ when I was 15, 16 years old, you know, eventually fell out of ministry because of a moral failure. But I know the work he did in my life.
Right.
I found Christ. He discipled me. I owe him a lot about who I am today. You know, when I went to Bible college, the chancellor of the university had a moral failure.
Right.
You know, there was, you know, my life was forever changed by that school.
Right.
But, you know, I had to process that whole, you know, scandal that spread across this. And many of my friends in Bible college dropped out because of that scandal, which my thought was, are you kidding me?
Right.
So you're here for him, but not for Jesus?
Right.
Yeah, so it was like, yeah, I'm affected by it, and I'm so sad, and this kind of, you know, ruined my plans, you know. However, you know, the next day I got to move back to school.
Right.
You know, I want to learn about the gospel, and I want to learn about ministry and how to follow Jesus. And I had great professors, you know, and we can't allow one person's bad choices, Ravi or your chancellor or even your pastor.
Right.
You know, when you're a young believer, stay focused.
It reminds me, did you know a Dr. Winter?
I've heard of him. I don't think I had him.
I'll talk to you after this is over with. Yeah.
Really, he was at school.
He knows Justice and Anthony.
Yeah.
And reached out to them. He wants to do something with bridges in Australia or something.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I can't place him, but maybe I can later.
I think Anthony knows him from from your Bible college days or whatever.
Yeah, they're probably Anthony and I were there together at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, so we probably know each other. But all of those moral failures speak of that person's walk and not necessarily of the entire gospel. You know? You know, so I just, you know, I appreciate the work that Ravi Zachariah did. You know, it's, you know, is what it is, but his work speaks for itself. All right, so Lee Strobel. I had a chance to meet Lee Strobel once.
Come on.
Yeah, I did. I know, it's hard to believe. So I'm in Chicago, and I'm going to Willow Creek Church. Spent a whole week there, and we did all the workshops and seminars. This is like 20-some years ago. So anyway, Lee Strobel was one of the presenters that week.
Yeah.
And man, he is everything that his books, you know, portray him to be. He's such a, you know, well thought out, smart fellow. He was a reporter with Chicago Tribune. Yeah. And his wife got saved at Willow Creek. Right. Came home. So he told this story while I was in his workshop, and it was a small group of us. So that's how I got to be friends with him, and I have his cell number. And
nice.
No, not really. That's Josh. Yeah. But I was in a small group with him, and I learned so much from him, and he told his testimony. His wife came home, born again, talking about Jesus, and he was like, oh, wait, time out. We are not going to become, you know, holy rollers.
The movie's great. Have you seen the movie?
Which one?
The Case for Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Very well done.
It's incredible. So he said his wife just would not give it up. She kept saying, you just come to church. I want you to hear the message. And at that time, the pastor was the founding pastor of Willow Creek.
Bill Hybels?
Yeah, Bill Hybels was still the senior pastor there. Just come here, Bill. Everybody called him Bill because it was very, you know, relaxed atmosphere. And what kind of church were they? They were Reformed, I think.
I don't think so.
Remember. What were they?
I don't know.
I thought it was Dutch Reformed, but I can't remember. But anyway, it was a very laid-back atmosphere. She kept saying, come here, Bill, talk on Sunday, and you'll see what I... So he went, and he attended a few services, and he was convinced. He said, man, this is real. So he started doing the research to prove to her that it wasn't what she thought, and he started with the resurrection. Right. And after months of research, he concluded that
it was real.
Yeah. There's enough evidence to believe that this is real.
Yeah.
He gave his heart to Christ, and he wrote a book about his research, which became, you know,
the movie. Case for Christ.
Yeah, Case for Christ, which is an international bestseller. And man, you should read that book.
Yeah,
it is. It's really good. One of the best written books about, you know, the evidence that I've ever read. It's up there with Mere Christianity and a few of the other big ones.
Right.
Know. So anyway, I love Lee Strobel. We talked about Josh already. Tim Keller, William Lane Craig, who's getting older. Mm-hmm. All right, let's wrap it up, man. Anybody else you want to talk about? Any of your favorites we didn't cover yet?
No, I think Dr. Brown is probably, like, after Greg Koukl, and the way that he teaches you to use illustrations, there's a lot of value there for me.
Yeah, I love that idea.
So I like that guy a lot. But, you know, Dr. Brown probably is right up there. If he may even be, you know, he may even outpace Greg Koukl just from the simple fact that he can have any conversation with anybody about anything and he has a good reason for the hope that lies within him.
He brings it back around too. Right.
So his radio show is really good. His website is really good. He's got a lot of great information. You know, for those, if you've got questions about the faith, why we can believe some of the things that we as Christians believe. Yeah. Was it askdrbrown.org? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fantastic website. Lots of great information there. Right. He has an online radio show, which is inthelineoffire.org, which is great as well. I used to listen to that, again, going all the way back to when I first got saved. He was one of I used to listen to his podcast then, because we had to listen to like 4 chapels every week. So I counted that as one of my chapel sessions. But people regularly just call in, and he answers questions about why we could believe in the resurrection. Why do we, what day should we worship on? Obscure things like that, to, why Jews behaved a certain way during, that time period. So I think his PhD is in PhD is in Near Eastern languages, Semitic languages from New York University or something like that. Yeah, incredibly smart guy, but spirit-filled. Crazy testimony, overcoming LSD and heroin and all kinds of other stuff. So
his testimony is similar to yours.
Right. That's why one of the reasons why I liked him so
he's
much.
Like, he came out of darkness into the glorious light. And speaking of that, you're working on your master's, right?
I am.
So what is your master's then?
So it's the master's in divinity, which is probably the most pretentious degree you could ever get.
Divinity, yes.
Yeah, the MDiv. So a Master of Arts is usually 32 to 34 hours.
Yeah.
The Master in Divinity is 74 hours. Ooh. So it's quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying it. I'm almost done. So 5 more classes and I'll be finished.
Almost done.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
You're about to have an MDiv.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. He's my friend. Some of my best thinking is done by my smart friends.
Amen.
Yeah. So proud of you, man. Are you going to get your doctorate?
Not the PhD for sure. I'm not going that route. Justice just finished his PhD work. Super happy in him. If I continue on, it'll be for a DMin.
Yeah.
A doctor of ministry.
Yeah.
But right now, I just got to get past the.
Yeah, you got to just get over this hurdle.
I'm so
Justice
ready to be
Freeman,
done.
who is he the president of our school?
No, he is VP of. He's the academic dean.
Yeah, he's academic dean.
Yeah.
Our school is Bridges Christian College. Yeah. If you're looking for an online, fully accredited university, talk about Bridges for a minute.
Yeah, Bridges is an amazing school. One of the reasons that I love Bridges so much is because of who it's the core of who we are, is to help people get that fully accredited theological degree without the crippling student loan debt. Yeah. And to me, that's what it's all about. So many people, you went to Bible college, I went to Bible college, and so many people we know went to Bible college and unfortunately graduate with debt.
Right.
And I think about a few
staggering debt.
Yeah, I think about a few missionaries that we know that had to wait years before they can go overseas because the sending organization didn't want them to have debt.
Right.
So they had accumulated $20,000-$30,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah, some more.
Yeah, and then you've got to work to pay that off, or the Lord's got to do some sort of creative miracle and provide for you to pay off that debt before the individual can go overseas. So what we do, and we have a few AG missionaries right now, Jamie and Chad Elder are both AG missionaries going through our program. So what we do is we use the online technology, and we use all of the professors that we have to make sure that we're able to provide the same accredited theological education that you would get if you went to a traditional 4-year brick and mortar school. But we do that all online to help people get into ministry quicker and faster.
And you are the vice president of
College Advancement
of Bridges, bridgeschristiancollege.com.
Right.
If you want to know more about it, it's fully accredited.
Yep.
It's
let's just put the caveat out there. Yeah. Right now we're in quote unquote candidacy stage. So, but what that basically means is we've done everything that we need to do.
Right.
We've paid all the money we need to pay.
Yeah.
We have no flags against us. We've literally done everything. The reality here is whenever these accrediting agencies want to put their stamp of approval on it, they don't do it within a year. Yeah. They don't do it within 2 years. They don't even do it within 3 or 4. Yeah. It's a years-long process.
Right.
And they want to make sure that the institution is actually staying faithful and doing what they're supposed to do. And that's what we've been doing. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's what Bridges has been doing.
Year, is that where we are?
Yeah, I think so.
Of our accreditation?
Of this whole process,
Right.
Yeah.
And soon we'll have the stamp. But we've
within
already,
a year, we believe that within a year we will have crossed this next hurdle.
Right.
Again, it's not that there's any more work that needs to be done. We just need to keep doing what we're doing.
Right.
So.
And all of our faculty have at least masters. Most have doctorates.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Master's degrees, PhDs, people much smarter than me.
Yeah.
So, that's the good news there. The real good news, again, to me, is the fact that all these individuals are volunteering their time.
Yeah.
Me, Justice, Dr. Miller, all of our professors and staff members, we believe in the mission and the vision of the school so much so that we dedicate our time to help people get from where they are to where God wants them to be.
When will we be able to start receiving Title? Is it 7 funds?
Title 4, I think.
Title 4 is one of the U.S. title, but that will qualify our students to
get Pell
apply
Grants.
for Pell Grants.
Yeah,
Pell Grants.
it should be this year.
So we're there.
Yeah.
So if you're watching and you're interested and you want to use your Pell Grant, soon, maybe this fall, that'll be a possibility to help students.
We have to. I think the next thing to turn in is the self-study, which is stuff that we don't have to really talk about. But we're right there.
Yeah.
So
maybe by the fall semester.
That's the goal.
Yeah, boy, that would be fantastic. So check out bridgeschristiancollege.com.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a great place.
Yep.
We did a series as we're wrapping up today in January of this year called Genesis, and our focus was to defend the Bible from the very first verse. So we went from in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, all the way through chapter 11 and 12, which is when Abraham came on the scene. And we talked about Abraham, we talked about the Tower of Babel, we talked about the flood, we talked about the fall of man, and we talked about creation.
Right.
And, and there is so much scientific and historical evidence that backs up what the Bible says.
Yep.
Even to the point of when Noah landed the ark on Mount Ararat after the flood, coincides amazingly with the rise of the Sumerian Empire.
Yep.
And historians and archaeologists can't explain it. They think, well, that was the first human civilization that we know of. But it's just beautiful that it happened to coincide perfectly with Noah reestablishing civilization in Mesopotamia, which is where the Sumerians were. So there's so much evidence in the archaeological and the historical documents of humanity that coincide and reaffirm the Bible. It's just Noah's Ark. Noah built the ark to these specifications, and Moses, who was the author of Genesis, probably learned it from his father and his father's father, that passed down from Noah himself, wrote down the exact measurements of the ark, which he had no way of knowing if that would be a vessel that could really float on the water. He didn't build a prototype to see if it was going to happen.
Well, let's test this out first.
Yeah, but he wrote it down, and now we know because of the shipbuilding science that that's the exact measurements that a seagoing vessel would have to be in order to survive a catastrophic flood.
Right.
And there's hunting. If you want to know more about it, it's the entire series Genesis is posted at jf.church and on the Journey app. If you haven't downloaded the app yet, go to your app store and download it. It's free. Type in Journey Fellowship Church. You can download the app, and all of our message series are posted there. But I really want to direct your attention to Genesis. Go back and watch it and rewatch it. It's 5 parts, and I think I could have did 10 parts or 20 parts.
Right.
I had so much information that every week I'd have to cull it down to 35 or 40 minutes, and I probably could have went 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
Because it's just so much evidence that confirms the Bible. And one Sunday after church, I talked about Noah's Ark, and there was a 15-year-old high school student in the lobby waiting for me when I walked out. He said, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Hey, I love what you said, but I don't know how to jive that with evolution." Man, what a perfect conversation to have with a 15-year-old, because he goes to public school and he's taught that evolution is a fact. So we had a 10-minute conversation in the lobby discussing creation versus evolution. And then he asked me a question that I really love. He said, "Then what about the dinosaurs?" I was like, man, what a great question.
Oh, you got me.
Yeah, what a great question. He thought he had me.
Right.
Yeah, but it was a wonderful conversation. And I saw him this past Sunday, so it's been a month and a half now. So he's still coming to church. So this past Sunday, I said, "Hey, you're Anthony. We talked about dinosaurs." He said, "Yeah." He said, I'm still studying that. But I just appreciate how God's word always opens our heart to truth. Even when you're 15, people are looking for answers, and and being able to defend the message and the gospel is, the duty of every believer. So, Anything you'll wrap up with?
No, I think I would say there's a guy named Ken Boa who also has a lot of really good material, BOA. And one of the things he says often about apologetics specifically is, obviously we want the gospel to get into people's hearts.
Yeah.
And that's where real life change happens from the inside out. And a lot of times we dismiss, having some type of logical conversation because you're just supposed to have, it's an experience you have, and it is.
Yeah.
But what Dr. Boa says is there are definitely people who the word never gets into their heart because their mind rejects it.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason to have these sorts of conversations with people. There's a reason to have illustrations in your mind. When somebody says, "Oh, isn't like God on top of a mountain and we could take a path to get up there?"
All those paths.
No, God, instead of thinking of a mountain and all these different paths, let's think of a hedge and a maze. And you got to get your way through the life as a maze.
Yeah.
So changing the illustration. There's a reason why those things are valuable.
Yeah.
Because for some people, they get stuck up here in their head.
True.
And the difference between here and here may only be 12 inches, but it could also be eternity for someone, right?
Boy, that's so true.
So, there's a great reason to study apologetics.
Man, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Amen.
We should do this again in a couple of months. Continue, maybe some new perspectives from other apologists and some of the guys that we didn't mention. There are so many others.
Yeah,
I think I found a list of the top 50 apologists in the world, and we only covered like 7 of them.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about Gary Habermas and the resurrection.
I saw him, he's on my list. I'm gonna check him out.
Yeah.
I stumbled upon a guy on YouTube. I don't even know his name. And but the YouTube video was called "I've Got a Question" or something like that. And he was standing in like a free speech alley of a university, and there was like 40 kids in this free speech alley, and they were all asking questions.
Yeah,
and he was just on his feet answering these.
Love that.
I mean, hard questions.
Right.
Like, it wasn't softball at all. It was like, it was things that would make me have to sit and think for a little while. And he was just answering off the top of his head or right out of his heart.
Sure.
So I got to go look. I didn't get to write his name down to add him to my list because I found him while I was watching somebody else. But I think it was something like, I have a question or something like that. But anyway, there's so many other guys that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to it maybe in a couple months.
Sure.
Check your schedule. See how you're doing with your master's degree. And
looking forward to it.
We'll do some more talking about apologetics. Well, this has been Stories I Didn't Tell Last Sunday. My guest today has been our Next Step pastor here at Journey, Al Chartier. I'm Doug McAllister. If you don't have a church, come visit us. If you live on the North Shore here in Louisiana, we are in Slidell, Louisiana. You can find our address and driving directions on our website, jf.church, or on the Journey app. Download it free from your app store today. Or come visit us on the online campus. Al also serves as our online campus pastor, so you'll see him on the online campus also. You can check us out online Sunday mornings, watch the online campus, or come in person, or do both. But we've enjoyed having you today. We enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
And for Journey Fellowship Church, I'm Doug McAllister, and this has been Stories I Didn't Tell Last Sunday.